Hello, and welcome to Alienate UK. Please put all questions in caps and start with an emoji. Super Chat and Super Stickers are now active.
Let's go.
Hello, welcome to today's show. Just before I bring the guest on, that is no Nicole. She's not feeling too well. She's caught a bug, so yeah, it wouldn't be very appealing for her to be on. So unfortunately, she's not with us on this one. But we are back on Friday, where we're going to be talking about our encounters 2 weeks ago when we was at Gettysburg and on the flight back. And we are on Sunday. We are going to be on with Gerald and Jane on their show. When I get this up, because I will forget. There we go. Piercing the Veil. Ignore the images, they're all AI, and there's not a lot I can do about it, but there we go. So we're going to be on at 8 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. EST. So enough of that. I'm going to bring the guest on. It's Nigel Watson. Nigel writes a monthly column, Sources of the Damned, about UFOs for Fortean Times, and regularly writes book reviews and has contributed to a number of other UFO-based magazines. So welcome to the show, Nigel, and thank you so much for coming on.
Okay. I'm still being terrified by that introduction, actually.
I think that was, I think I stole that off one of the websites that you're on.
Okay. Oh dear.
So, is that still active? All that I just said. I didn't read them all off, just in case there was some that you didn't contribute to anymore.
Yeah, I mainly contribute to Fortean Times. Yeah, like a lot of websites have kind of gone into sort of sleep mode. I used to write for the Magonia website, which still exists as an archive, but John Rimmer, who ran it, sort of stopped uploading new material sort of earlier this year. So I used to write a lot of kind of book reviews for that.
Yeah. Oh. So you still do the 14 times though?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been doing it for about 4 years now. And before then, I was writing a few bits and pieces for them, but it's quite nice to get a regular column where you can be a bit more consistent. And there's always stuff to write about UFOs, particularly in these last few years. So much is going on, you know, it's hard to keep up, really.
Yeah, tell me about it. So you have a book out at the moment, don't you?
Yeah.
It's not long since come out. Was it in July that it came out? I'm just going to get a picture of it now.
It came out about last week, actually, so it's available everywhere. And it's called
just be 1 second. Everything's running slow.
Oh dear.
It's here somewhere. Yeah, I've got it. I uploaded everything ready, but it's nothing is doing what it's supposed to. Oh, it's one of them months, I think, already. Right, so that's right, I've got it on my phone. So the name of the book is Portraits of Alien Encounters Revisited, High Strangeness, British UFO Cases. So from what I've read, you went out interviewing people where they had their encounters and took full details of the witness statement. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's most of it.
How difficult was that to do?
Pardon?
How difficult was that to do? To go out and meet up with people?
It was fairly difficult since that I had to sort of travel a few miles to see these different people, and it was only because of the publicity given to Close Encounters of a Third Kind that a lot of people came forward to report their experiences. I think before then people weren't very keen to report anything other than what you might call normal UFO sightings. But I think Close Encounters kind of opened the floodgates, and people were encouraged to report close encounters of a third kind, where people see a UFO land and occupants leaving it or nearby. And about the same time, Jenny Randalls had set it up.
So how long did it?
That was in the 1970s.
Yes. How long did it take to get the book ready for?
Well, I kind of gathered all the things together.
Right. I'm just going to go out and come back in again because he's a bit back.
Yeah, I put most of the information together in the sort of early 80s, and then put it together as a book and published it in 1990. So, the original book is quite old, but the new version, revisited, takes a few chapters out, and I've added some new chapters about cases in that area. And so in a way, the new material kind of slots in with the old material. Plus, over that period, there have been a lot more new theories and ideas about these sorts of encounters. So I've sort of added a bit about the context of these sightings, and so I've kind of brought it up to date. And I thought it was a good way of kind of reviewing my sort of origins in UFO research, starting in Scunthorpe, where I originally lived, and I helped set up the Scunthorpe UFO Research Society, and we started off just by interviewing local witnesses who mainly saw lights in the sky, that sort of thing. So it was kind of a big step interviewing more high strangeness cases, and we generally had to travel further away to places like Leeds, Sheffield, Hull, and particularly Bradford. And in a way, it was before abductions and the graves were a sort of big thing in the mainstream media. Only obscure magazines really spoke about Betty and Barney Hill or the Anthony Villas case. So those sort of cases weren't that well known, and the sort of people I spoke to had contact through either meditation, yoga, or in dreams and nightmares. So in a way, a lot of these weren't actual physical contacts like close encounters of a third kind, from messages received from what they perceive to be alien sources. later in my book, I've got some cases of people doing more like classic alien abductions, but in the earlier part of the book, people have just seen like 12-foot high robots in the case of Paul Bennett, and sightings of craft I think that might have landed. But there weren't a sort of specifically abduction cases, like the Saltbud Hopkins and the like obtained. Perhaps because generally hypnosis hasn't been very well looked at in British ufology. I suppose if I'd hypnotically regressed some of these witnesses, we might have had more elaborate stories of aliens sort of taking people on board the craft and examining them. But I didn't think it was really ethical, and also the people I spoke to didn't particularly need hypnotic regression or anything like that. I think most of them were just happy to be as they were.
Yeah. So, no, you're all right. I've got a couple of questions for you. I'll do them now because I'll end up missing them. So the first one is from Darren, Baby with a Laser, and he wants to know, Nigel, what got you into it all?
It was quite easy, really. It was in the late 60s when the Apollo missions were occurring, and I just got into watching, I think from Apollo 8 onwards. That was a mission where they went around the moon at Christmas time. So I think it sort of grabbed your attention more because there wasn't, much else on TV except Morecambe and White.
Yeah.
So that really grabbed my attention, that it seemed so fantastic. And I think one of the astronauts read a passage from the Bible as well. So it's almost like a spiritual as well as a technological achievement. And so from then on, I just cut out anything I saw about UFOs in the newspapers and about space missions and everything. And then that led to me going to the local library and finding UFO books. One was The Sources Speak by George Hunt Williamson, who was one of the early contactees. And I think a lot of his messages were through like radio, shortwave radio. And I think that there's mention of the use of Ouija boards and that sort of thing. And, I suppose I was kind of willing to accept that because I thought, our own astronauts have already visited another planet, another body out there. So if aliens came, it would be logical to try and communicate and research us. But I also got the Intelligent Man's Guide to UFOs as well, and a few other books which were more sort of more like a solid account of more like the more usual sightings of airline pilots and credible witnesses seeing things. And there was that division really in American ufology, but you have a contactees like George Adamski, who said they met humanoid aliens like off and flying in their craft. And then you have the people like Donald Keyhole, who believed in UFOs visiting our atmosphere, but more in terms of them being solid nuts and bolts craft, and they didn't really want to look into, what might be inside these craft. And also, they were trying to put pressure on the American government to disclose whatever secrets they had. So it was a kind of split between the contactees who already knew everything about what the aliens were up to, and then the civilian, more serious investigators wanting to make it scientifically credible and to find out more about what the government know about it. And I suppose there is still a bit of a split like that in ufology, and that I think also with a lot of the cases in my book, some ufologists might still say, oh, they've got nothing to do with UFOs. These are all about, the power of imagination, or people dreaming things, or people having, false memories or sleep paralysis. But I'd argue that you can't really censor out everything. I think you've got to embrace everything and look at them from, different angles. And I think that's why I sort of attempted to put this book together to kind of show the kind of cases that aren't usually accepted by sort of the majority of ufologists. I think over time this has changed, but I think in the 70s and 80s, people were just about coming on board with alien abductions, mainly those that were reported in the United States. So I kind of drifted into it. I think, just because, space exploration and moon travel, just had the headlines for the last few years of the 60s. So by the 70s, I was kind of prepared to look at UFOs. I suppose I didn't really know better. I think if I was older and had more fixed ideas, I'd probably think, oh, that's a load of rubbish. I think when you're at this age, you sort of think, you think, oh, why not?
Yeah. No, I totally get that. So I've got a question for just with what you were saying then. What do you find more fascinating, or what's more interesting for you? The technology of the craft, or the beings, the humanoids that are using them?
All right. I'm more interested in the kind of humanoids people report seeing, because I'm sort of skeptical about the solid reality of a craft people see. And also, like I say, a lot of the people in my book actually encounter these beings in dreams and nightmares, or altered states of consciousness even. So I'm looking more at, in terms of the sort of things people do report, like the different types of entities. Like Paul Bennett in the early chapter in the book mentions a 12-foot high robot that's taking soil samples and gliding along sideways. And then there's stories of people seeing like a very tall blonde-haired man who looked out of place in France on a hot summer's day. And there's quite a few examples there of people seeing out of place people that seem to act strangely in a sort of alien manner. And then afterwards I thought, oh, that person didn't seem real. And there's even one story by Paula Green who encountered this sort of strange, really tall blonde-haired man who looked like a cardboard cutout, who took her hand and took her flying into the sky. And and that seems a very kind of really strange encounter. And so I think it's interesting to look at these different types of entities and things people see, because often they kind of reflect the person's own psychology, really, and the things that concern them. I think the same applies to the type of spaceships people might see. I think if people are fearful of aliens, are more likely to encounter reptoid type aliens or insectoid ones, and whereas the Nordic type humanoids are usually tall, fair-haired and blue-eyed, they're more likely to be regarded as benevolent and good. And I think that's something I discovered in my book. Nearly everyone I spoke to seemed to think there were kind of good and bad aliens, and quite a few of them, reference the Bible, a book of Revelations, and the visions seen by people reported in the Bible. And I suppose that wasn't perhaps as surprising as it should have been, because Chariots of the Gods had been a very big bestseller at the late 60s as well. So this whole idea that the aliens were nothing new had been coming. But even Erich von Däniken didn't sort of take any interest in modern day encounters until recent years, because I think he kind of wanted to separate the two. But I suppose with more and more bizarre stories that seem to support his ideas, I suppose he's eventually come on board. Even
he's joined the dark side.
Yeah, even if you might not agree with his theories or anything, or that I think it's true of a lot of books of that period, those by Jacques Vallée or John Keel or whoever at that time. There's been more and more research and more information available online. So if you look over, say, Operation Trojan Horse, you'll find a lot of the facts in it are a bit wrong, because it's just scratch the surface of some of these things. And it's also like some of these books, the mention of were no significant sightings before sort of World War II and the Foo Fighters, but they kind of skipped over things like the Phantom airships seen over Britain before the First World War, things like that. But I think that's the thing, the subject's always evolving and people are collecting more and more information. But having said that, there's so much data out there, it's hard to get a handle on it, really. And I think with my book, I've also tried to put the context of my cases into those of other sightings in the United Kingdom. So I've supplied a bibliography of most of the major British books that mention, other cases. And I also mention a couple of archives where you can study more about these things, and also a few, online archives. So I think there's quite an abundance of British cases going back to the 50s, online. And in a way, I'm just trying to use my book as a kind of a guidebook to going into more research.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. So I'll do the next question. I'm just trying to get a picture of the cover of your book up. I've managed to find it. Right, so this one is from Sober Carper, and he's asking, "Hi Nigel, apart from Richard Shaver encounters, have you ever gathered any incident accounts with subterranean Dero and Tero races?"
All right. Yeah, that's a fascinating case, because Richard Shaver's writings cropped up early on in the kind of flying saucer phase of the subject. And I think Arnold Palmer sort of encouraged Shaver to write these stories for his publication of a flying saucer magazine. And they're quite extreme sort of contactee type stories. I think he alleges these aliens live underground and they use beams to force people to do things. And I suppose a lot of people thought these were quite outrageous stories, but Palmer encouraged the promotion, really. And I think some people say that Shaver might have been schizophrenic, but he was certainly very imaginative and had these fearful thoughts about the Dero and Tero, who were sort of fighting over how they manipulate humanity. And in my book, in particular, I reference Norman Harrison, who says he was in sort of mental contact with alien forces, but also said there are good and bad aliens fighting over taking over humanity. And there's another case in the book as well, and you often come across this where people say, I've already said about the type of aliens people see, is the fact that there's these good and bad forces, and that seems to be a recurrent theme. And even with the latest sort of UAP thing, some people are saying, they're promoting too much of the danger of non-human intelligences because they want the American government to investigate. So if a heighten of a fear factor, the government's more likely to react to that. And they're equally benevolent aliens, and some people are more likely to contact them. I've got another person in the book who has written a little booklet about her own mental communications with the aliens, and they are mainly good aliens, and that they seem to exist millions of years ahead of us. And she said they come back in time to visit us, and that fits in with these time traveler theories. But she also links it with Atlantis and saying that we've constantly been manipulating society, but for the good. And so you've got quite a few different aspects of the subject, which I think often reflect the psychology of a particular experiencer. And it can be quite powerful, really. I think Shaver's stories sound really so outrageous and powerful, and the stories I've heard from like Norman Harrison were very powerful and convincing and quite kind of depressing as well. You feel like listening to him, your own soul was being sucked into oblivion. And I did tell him that he did say he was sort of optimistic, but he was anti everything about science and what we'd done to the planet. But I suppose on the good side, he had guardian angels as well. He saw the Archangel Michael, who said he was a guardian sort of warrior figure. So he did say we were good forces, but with science and the way humanity was going, he felt that the good forces were losing their impact on our on us, really.
Yeah. So were you saying about Atlantis? Do you think these sort of places that are supposedly used to exist, do you think that they could still exist now, but on a different frequency?
Well, I'm not really sure. Atlantis does crop up a lot in the subject, even in the early days. And I suppose the kind of romantic view is almost thinking of King Arthur and Camelot. It's some unattainable paradise, really. And perhaps that's something that you get in the literature of sometimes if you have an alien encounter or taken away by aliens, it's often to a planet, more like a heavenly realm, really. And so in a way, there is, although it's in a secular context, you still get all these kind of religious reverberations in a lot of these stories. I suppose people say because of the way our societies are now, that there's a kind of religious or spiritual vacuum, and that these experiences fill that vacuum. But you can argue it both ways. You can argue whether it's just psychological and sociological or due to culture, but you could also argue similarly that the aliens, if there is an intelligence out there, it could manipulate us in that way as well. So you either believe in just sort of proper, I suppose what you'd say, proper scientific viewpoint, or whether you're going to take it beyond that. I think that's something. I think the problem is the evidence is always very ambiguous. With alien abductions, there's stories of implants, for example, but whenever they've tried to get them, they've kind of dissolved or gone away, or they've got lost in the post or been stolen. So it's frustrating to get hold of implants, and then even if you get hold of one, who will investigate it. I think today more scientific organizations are likely to want to investigate it, analyze it, but what are you going to find? Because if it is a truly alien technology, would we have the ability to define it as an alien object, or they could disguise it as something that we wouldn't be able to detect or investigate?
Yeah. No, I get that, because I believe I had an implant in my nose, and when I pulled it out, it was like probably the size of a grain of rice, but it was hollow in the middle. And long story short, I put it on the bedside table, left it on there. I should have been covered in blood. When I woke up the next morning, it wasn't there. There was no blood. There was nothing. But I was like under the membrane inside my nose to get this thing. I could feel it. This is I'd say about 9 years ago, I reckon, I guess. Okay. And then couldn't find it the next morning. I was on my hands and knees looking for it everywhere. Nothing. So that's all I know.
That's the intangibility of alien evidence, really. But there are, like you say, there are lots of cases, particularly in the 90s. Well, I think even in the 80s, of people having these nasal implants, and I suppose the classic thing is that alien abductees wake up with nosebleeds, which implies that they've had something implanted in the nose. And like I say, it's a bit frustrating because often this evidence is quite ambiguous. But it's surprising how many people have said they've had an implant. But I think people like Mary Rodwell have kind of written about implants and wondering what these, why do people have implants? I think one idea is like the aliens are sort of tagging us the way we tag cattle, or that we can monitor you, or even sort of operate you by remote control and make you act on their behalf, or to gain knowledge through your eyes. But so there's a lot of speculation about implants, even though they're notoriously difficult to obtain. Yeah.
No, I just triggered something then, because I never used to get nosebleeds, not even as a child. Even if I banged my face, it still wouldn't. I get the odd one now and again, but it wouldn't just start. But just about what you said, during the time that I think I had this implant, I used to get nosebleeds, say 2 or 3 every 2-3 months, and then once I removed whatever this thing, it could have been a piece of rice. I don't know how it got there, if it was, but I know I've noticed, thinking back, that I've not had a nosebleed since then.
All right.
Nothing whatsoever.
That's interesting.
That's weird.
But I think I've cured you now. But, I think once I got a bit of lead pencil in my finger, and it seemed to be when I was a kid, it seemed to be there for years, but it's probably there quite a long time. And normally, if you get like a prickle or something, it'll blister up and then come out, won't it? But this just seemed to stay in my finger for ages. So looking back on it, perhaps it was implanted. But I couldn't even remember how I did it, but I just assumed it was a bit of lead. The tip of my lead
like
pencil.
Messing about at school or something.
But I think, it's like this whole thing about people waking up with scars and scoop marks, which Hopkins in particular put forward. I'm not sure how convincing that is, because I've woken up with all sorts of different marks and things. Or if you don't look at your body
Yeah.
You don't really, if you're really looking, if you've had some sort of weird alien experience and you're encouraged to look, you might find marks, but this might be just marks from a mattress or, you know.
Yeah, it could be.
So,
It's like,
and also we're quite superficial.
Yeah. Well, if you're asleep and you just start, you've got an itch and you start scratching, it could be anything, couldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, yeah. But I think that's the thing, though. If you look at everything becomes part of the subject. So if you see somebody strange street, they're an alien humanoid, and if there's a coincidence, it's down to the aliens. Or if something's missing in your room and then you find it again, it's the aliens, really. So I think even Paul Bennett, who's in my book, admits that he was seeing everything from a sort of John Keel point of view, and I think even he admitted he's a bit obsessed with the subject. And I think that is a sort of problem to get any perspective on things. And it's nice to look at different viewpoints, really, and not to get too embroiled in some of these things, and not to be too precious. I think some investigators have a favorite case, and then if you try to give an alternative explanation, they get rather prickly about it. And it's a bit annoying, though, because a lot of cases are promoted without looking at alternative explanations, and if they do mention the alternatives, they usually rubbish them within a few lines. And I think as an investigator, I think you've got a responsibility to at least add a bit of context or a different viewpoint, really. Because otherwise it's setting the odds, it's setting the sort of deck towards their viewpoint without looking at anything else.
Yeah, no, because if you're saying that, I was watching, I think it was on Blaze, it was last night, and they're talking about the Rendlessham incident of 1980, and there's going on about all the different things. And then there's a lot of stuff they was talking about that I've not heard before. So where a few people, I'm not going to name names, you'll probably know who these people are anyway, but certain people agreed to do lie detectors. And one particular person came back that he was pretty much just talking a load of rubbish about what had gone on. And it's like, I know that this person has said stuff and it's all come back that it's not true, but I didn't realise that he had actually done this lie detector and it came back like the majority of what he was talking about was just literally made up.
Right. I think that's a problem, though, with something like an oak case like that. It's like fine wine; it improves over years, or gets worse over years. But because it's such a long time since that event happened, and at first, there was a lid on it, and then Colonel Hope's letter got revealed to the media about there actually was some sighting there, but the stories got more and more complicated. Somebody said they had a binary code downloaded when they got to the landing site.
Yeah, because he said he woke up in the middle of the night and just wrote all these like the binary, just pages and pages of zeros and ones, and didn't finish until he'd done the last one. I can't remember how long he said. I think it's like sat there for like 5 hours or something. And then they found, and this is what got me, they found a way to decode it.
Yeah.
And they came up with that it was all these different locations around the globe. It was all either mathematical or it's all maths anyway. There's geometrical or maths, or there's the pattern. But it's like, I know what binary is. I wouldn't know. I won't have the foggiest on how to decode it. But if you've got zeros and ones, surely if you add an extra 1 or 0 from part of it, then you're going to get a totally different place or different location.
Yeah.
So it's
I
I didn't buy into that.
No, I think that's a problem though. You get different people turning up years afterwards and saying, insert themselves into the story, and then you get people falling out with other people. On set, people saying, "Oh, he's a liar. No, he's a liar." And I think even at the time I wasn't too convinced by the story, even though a tape recording of Colonel Hope going out into the woods and everything came out. But it just seemed like, some people said, is it some sort of prank or whether, or drunk on New Year's Eve or something, or, did it just like, because they're on a military base as well, were they spooked by lights they didn't understand, like, there's the explanation of the Orford Nest Lighthouse, but some people say, oh, it couldn't have been the light because I see the light there all the time, but it might have been something else. But then if you're in woods, you don't really have much sense of what's beyond the woods, really. So lights come from a direction that you wouldn't really link with a lighthouse necessarily. We're kind of stumbling around, and then we were getting these weird Geiger counter readings, which didn't really seem to make that much sense either. And you think, well, if it was something more solid, you'd have a bit better evidence. But it's one of these cases where it's rumbled on, and it's sort of like a British Roswell, which I'd only say it's a British Roswell because, like Roswell, it's just generated so many rumours and characters turning up that it's almost like now, where do you start with a case like that? After all these years, there's quite a few books on the subject and different interpretations. Was it a prank? Were they covering up some sort of nuclear accident, which would be very embarrassing to the Americans? And was there secret experiments going on there? It's like,
they've got the underground tunnel, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've got the train line under the ground from Eastgate, and apparently that's what the Americans were using to transport the nuclear warheads from one point to the other, without being seen. So there's all. But watching that documentary last night, it kind of not convince me, but I'm like, but did it really happen? There was too much negative response that come out of it for me now to think, did that actually happen? There's only one, the main guy, I can't remember his name, and he's the only person that has stuck to the same story like 20, 30, 40 years on. He's never changed it, and he's stuck straight down the line. Everyone else was a bit up and down.
I think as well, because it's attracted so much publicity and there are so many different documentaries about it, people have been quick to get on the bandwagon. And in America, you can go on the lecture circuit and, get on different programs and things. So, it can be, I suppose in America, it might be lucrative, or they just want to get attention. And I think that's a problem with a lot of major UFO cases. It's hard to get a real handle on them. And I think Roswell's another one where there's still some people who staunchly support the idea that it was a spaceship, but you've got all these people who say, well, two craft crashed, and one had alien bodies in, and then there's some stories that dead alien bodies were recovered, or that living aliens were recovered and taken to Area 51, and things like stories like Skinny Bob and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think they're fascinating if you just take them as stories, really, and then you kind of have to make up your own mind about whether who you think's telling the truth and those that aren't. But I think it's notoriously difficult because even if somebody passes a lie detector, that only proves that what they're saying is true.
Yeah.
So we might actually believe in say you could believe that aliens have landed because somebody else told you that. So
yeah.
it's truthful that you think that's true.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah. Because I've always thought that it's like if you believe something, regardless of whether you know it's true or false, as long as you believe it enough, surely that would be more feasible enough to pass a lie detector.
Yeah, exactly. And
so, yeah.
Yeah, I think Americans always put a bit more belief in that, didn't they? That, with the Travis Walton case, I think
yes,
that they used lie detector tests, and some of them are a bit ambiguous, or people then question the qualifications of a lie detector operator. So then you get into an argument about the validity of lie detection, which takes you away from a validity of that person's story. And I think another thing is, if you look at, say, a documentary on Travis Walton or some other case, you're only getting the story basically from their point of view and from the people supporting that point of view. And if you were to know that person as a friend or a neighbor or something, you might have a different perspective on that. Like sometimes they might say, well, so and so that were told all sorts of different lies, and sometimes you get that where somebody's come out with some outrageous UFO story, then you find out they've been responsible for similar sort of stories in the past or outrageous claims. So you don't know quite how valid these people are and how much you can trust their testimony. And I think some people can tell a really good story and sort of the more they tell it, the more they believe it.
Yeah, no, I get that, but the reason I brought Rendlessham up, obviously, one because I was watching it last night, but also I've been there a few times and we've had strange things going on. I've never seen a UFO there. We've seen orbs. We've had like a humming noise in the middle of the forest. We've had digital K2 meter on the trees, like right in the middle of it, where there's no electricity, there's no water lines, nothing, and we're picking. The numbers are going up as we're on the tree. So whether the tree is giving off its own energy, that's the only thing that I can think of it being. But I know other people that have been there that have had weird stuff going on. They've took photos. Joe just randomly taking photos, and then they've looked back at the picture, and there's been things in there that weren't there at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So there is a lot of paranormal and weird stuff going on there. I do know that.
But don't you think there are certain sort of hot spots, like in the 60s we had Warminster, and that was a place, I went to in the sort of early 70s, and was like a sort of UFO pilgrimage, just the way people go to Rendlessham. And going up Cradle Hill is quite fascinating because there were always people hanging around the gates that led up to the barn, and you'd stand around in the code, and there were sort of hills in the distance where cars were travelling, but you didn't really see the hills. So, you just saw these lights sort of above what you thought was the horizon, and then you got satellites. And one night we kept seeing all these lights in the distance, but we kind of think, oh, well, it was probably searchlights or something from the army base, which isn't too far away.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of things going on in the sky in a little area, and then because you've gone there, looking for these things, there's a certain more intensity there. And we did when we were walking around. I think it was at a time when the Mothman prophecy book was out, and John Keel was writing about Mothman, and we saw these red eyes or eyes in the distance. And it was sheep in the field. So,
right.
But the thing is, certain places have an aura to them, and I think that's, it's quite good to visit them and see what they're like. But I think it also attracts people who want to promote UFOs like Arthur Shuttlewood did in Warminster. He was a local journalist, and he wrote up lots of stories for the local and national press about it. So he kind of helped galvanize a lot of the interest. And it also means it attracts pranksters and people wanting to sort of push a UFO agenda without being very critical about it. And then it becomes a kind of circus. I think perhaps Warminster could have exploited that more. I think in America, if there's a Warminster in America, we're more likely to have a kind of carnival every year or something to celebrate.
Well, yeah. But that's what they do. They have the Mothman Festival every year. I went to Gettysburg the other week for the Gettysburg Bash, and there was hundreds of people there. It's just too busy and too hot. It was good, don't get me wrong, but just the weather was too much. But it's like, so in America, it just seems that more people are, what's the word? It's gone.
Yeah.
No, can't think. It's just a normal word as well. More people.
They're more likely to be.
Yeah. They want to go. They want to do it. They want to be part of it. It's.
Yeah. I can get that impression, because I think in a way, it's nice to be swept along with a kind of a belief system that everybody else is locked into. And so I kind of hate being a kind of party pooper. But, it's easier being a believer. And whereas if you start saying, oh, that can't be right, or you're being a bit skeptical, you get kicked out, really, which is a bit... and so once I put something skeptical on Facebook, and somebody said, don't not my hobby. So in a way, I felt a bit bad about that, because in a way, perhaps some people, they don't really care about whether it's true or not. They want to believe it, and perhaps, like UFO documentaries, it's as much entertainment. That's not scientific evidence to prove it. It's just to entertain people who do believe that. And I think that's a problem with all these ex-CIA people. They retire from a CIA job, then set themselves up as a UFO expert, even though half of them actually know about the subject. And then they make TV series where they're going around Skinwalker Ranch or investigating cases that have been investigated to death. All you need is an ex-CIA man or a celebrity, and you take them to Roswell, you take them to Rendlessham Forest, you take them to Bonnie Bridge, you might take them to Warminster, you might end up in Stonehenge, but you can sort of almost predict the whole cycle of it. You want, and these are just like, we'll bring on a few skeptics or something just to sort of oil the wheels a bit. But it's an entertainment machine, really, and I think that's the problem also with there's a kind of new crop of people who write books about UFOs. Publishers think, oh, it's a popular subject, so we'll get somebody to write a book about it. And all they do is buy a stack of other UFO books. And all these other UFO books, they're not textbooks. They're just written, to popularize the subject.
Yeah.
And then these other writers get hold of them, and the stories are repeated again, and often the same stories repeated again and again. It often gets a bit better, or the witness name ends up getting spelt wrong, or the location changes. So it's hard, really, because the subject's so fluid and there's so many people particularly writing on the internet, these things kind of get elaborated, and you got to kind of push back and go back to the roots of some of these cases, like Rendlessham, really, and there is a lot of data out there, and perhaps it's a bit too overwhelming sometimes. There's, in the past, I used to just get UFO magazines in the post, and you'd get one every 3 months or so with an apology saying, yes, the printer's broken or there's been a postal strike or something. So it's a real great reward after 3 or 4 months to get Flying Saucer Review or Merseyside UFO Bulletin or Fortean Times in the post. And you'd have a month or so to read it. And it's same with letters. You'd exchange letters with people and you'd get these quite long letters about UFOs or anything. Whereas now, every day you can find UFO news and stuff on social media. And I don't think we always have time to process it. It's just one story after another.
Yeah.
So I think in a way we can get overwhelmed with all this information. And also a lot of it's can be a lot of misinformation or old cases that are rehashed, and then people have to say, "Oh, that was a hoax," and that people knew about it years ago. You know, so
there seems to be a lot of that lately, though.
Yeah. There's I'm trying to think of a case that came up. It was quite. The Aurora crash in Texas, where an airship is alleged to have crashed into a windmill. In Texas in 1896. It's part of that phantom airship.
I remember that.
America. But if you read the actual report, it's by a well-known person who was a member of a local liars club, and you can tell it's written tongue-in-cheek, and also to say, you know, was said, there was hieroglyphics on it indicating it came from Mars, and its pilot was a Martian. So what was the first thing they do? But they give it a burial the next day.
Yes.
And they hide all the wreckage down the well. So it's a ridiculous thing to do if they had all that evidence.
I know. Well, that was the thing, though, because they went back, didn't they? And they dug the well out, and there was nothing in there. And then all of a sudden, nobody could find this supposed grave of this Martian. It was like nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I suppose people seem to think there is a specific location in the cemetery, but nothing really. I think there was a marker or something.
There's a headstone or something, and there's nothing wrote on it, and they think that might be it.
Yeah,
but
I think people steal it as well, don't they?
Yeah, they couldn't get permission or something to not excavate it, but they could get permission to dig it up and check. So the best bet that they had was going through the well.
Yeah, that was something we were trying to investigate in the 70s, but I think that's the trouble for us when you're looking for, you believe there's this physical evidence. But if you look back at all those newspaper stories, a lot of them are just pulling your leg, the journalistic hoaxes. And so if you look in them, you can often find quite a lot of stories of a farmer found cogs and wheels in one of his fields, and he seems to think they fell from an airship flying over. And there's a story of somebody else who said they had a crashed airship on their property, and we were charging people like 1 cent to have a look at it. You know, a bit like the way they
try that.
A bit like the way farmers sowed crop circles, and I think nothing's really changed. Even if you look back then, with so many hoaxes and things, but some of the sightings seem quite impressive. But journalistic standards weren't particularly high then, and they were quite willing to tell stories, to entertain the audience, and perhaps people who read that Aurora crash report in the paper, we probably read it and just laughed because they knew that it was from a local liar, and it's got another one up on on people or whatever. So it was that sort of pranky sort of hoaxing sort of element to it. But you can link it to modern day stories of saucer crashes, where Leonard Stringfield, I think in the sort of 80s and 90s, collected all these stories spaceship crashes, and most of them were from anonymous military sources, and there's just literally 30 or 40 of these stories, and you think, oh, but the country's reigning sources, and there's I think there's a famous one that's supposed to have occurred in South Africa, and that turned out to be a terrible hoax.
Was that the one at the school with all the kids?
No, that was something else. But the kids saw a UFO land, and I think they saw aliens. And Johnny Mack interviewed the children later. So this is a case that's often put forward as being very impressive, but some people have come up with various explanations for what we might have seen. And in my book, I've mentioned quite a few cases of school children seeing UFOs and entities. Famously in Broadhaven in Wales, school children saw a UFO behind a kind of hedge, and they saw aliens, but none of no adults actually saw it, and even the children's story is a bit ambiguous. But with my own book, I've got a case of a schoolboy in Hull who said he saw a UFO land on the school, a flat roof at the school, and that like this alien, like it was I think it was in a kind of gold spacesuit with sort of breathing apparatus linked to the spaceship, and he was quite frightened by this, but no other child saw it. But it does link with the whole thing of like aliens being astronaut-like, and that was something of that period where lots of stories in Flying Saucer Review were of aliens in spacesuits investigating plants and animals and taking samples, and you don't really get that anymore. And it's like these greys or reptoids or anything, we don't seem to wear spacesuits anymore. That's when some people might argue, we've got acclimatized or something.
It could be. It could. But just with you saying that about that one in Wales, I've got a question from Sophia, sorry. Have you any stories from Wales, specifically the south?
Okay. Yeah, well, that Broadhaven one was a sort of centre of activity, and I think there was somewhere called a farmhouse in Pembroke, where I know families said they were plagued by all sorts of different UFO phenomenon. They said that cattle had been levitated into another field, and they had lots of spooky things going on. And I think some people have sort of said, well, it might have just been that the cattle had escaped and got into this other field, but they kind of put a paranormal slant on everything that was going on. And also there was a lot of sightings of Ripperston Farm. It's probably the thing I'm referring to.
Yeah.
But and in that area there are also sightings of humanoids in silvery suits, and there again, some people have argued that there was like a local people wearing like what do you call it, like firefighting suits, and that were just going around pranking people. I'm not sure how good that is, because it's a bit like crop circles where people turned up and said, oh yeah, we host all these crop circles. And I think, it wasn't physically possible for them to have done all these crop circle hoaxes. And I think it might be the same with these silver suited entities, were they dotting all over the place to do this? Seems a lot of hard work really to just get a little bit of newspaper publicity. But yeah, I think it's a fascinating thing that this all happened in the kind of, I think, late 70s, and there's a lot of things going on in that period. But, my cases aren't that well known, but the Broadhaven triangle cases did get quite a bit of national publicity. Same with Bonnie Bridge Late, So I think it's interesting the way these kind of flap areas sort of erupt and developed, and then there's sort of like, I don't think you get so much activity down in South Wales now, but I think it still impressed a lot of people. So I don't know, what was going on. Ripperston Farm sounded like a place that did attract a lot of this phenomenon, but you don't know whether the family involved were just on the alert to anything really odd going on and were sort of hypersensitive to things. But so I think there are quite a few books on the subject, but nothing, there's still this argument about whether it was a sort of alien invasion or whether it was just pranksters and hoaxes and things like that going on. But I suppose that's true of most of ufology.
Like you said, well, a lot of people say unless you're there and you witness it yourself, it's just taking other people's word that what they're saying is true.
Yeah, and it's a bit annoying, like some people say, oh, that was just a hoax or rumour, but, what evidence do they have for saying that, really?
Exactly,
They should have as much evidence as the people who say it was a spaceman or a weird phenomenon, or just, but just reporting what they saw without really saying what they thought it might be. They're just, giving an account of it without any agenda. And so I think I don't like the way people can just dismiss things. It was the same like with a lot of these childhood encounters. People might say, oh, it's just childish imagination, so it's not worth investigating. But I think you should then consider, why is their imagination shaped in terms of UFOs and aliens? Why aren't they seeing pixies and elves or phantom police or something?
And so they're seeing things that are not that well known, I suppose, for that age. Because they're not seeing things that they're watching on TV. It's not like cartoons or anything like that. I know people get they have the screen memory where they do show them stuff that they know, but try and try and make them think that if you go and tell anyone, well, obviously you've been watching too much TV if you've seen Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck or something. So I get that.
I think with children, they're more open to any unusual experience. They absorb things like sponges. So something to an adult would perhaps just seem mundane, or something to a child could seem more mystical. And I remember, when I was young, I hated going out in the dark if I had to go in the back garden. It's sort of like once you got away from the lights of a house, you got really fearful of things. And I think I remember being pushed down into this little pit near a castle once, and when I got out, I kind of thought I'd seen skeletons in a dungeon. So in a way, I suppose that was my imagination. But sometimes children see things that an adult wouldn't, but perhaps they are open to these things, whether it's part of developing psychology or but whatever alien forces are out there can sort of penetrate into children's minds, you know. And yeah, so I think it's interesting, but I think it's bad to encourage children to believe in alien abductions and things, because I think it can be quite disturbing for children, and children do have, you know, nightmares and things, and perhaps to encourage a child to interpret these as real aliens, I think is a bad thing to do, but that's what's happened in the past. So I think you've got to consider the ethics of this sort of things. I think, you know, I've got quite a lot of reports from sort of young adults in my book, and I think looking back at it, I think perhaps there'd be more ethical considerations, really. You know, should I be interviewing them about this, or, you know, so I think over time you got to go by your own experience and to think, you know, about the witness and experiencer, rather than your own eagerness to get evidence for, you know, spaceships or not, you know. So there's that angle to investigating cases. You don't want to encourage too much what we might be seeing, or wanting to please the investigator. I think that's happened in poltergeist cases where investigators have got entrenched with the family of poltergeist witnesses, and then they start seeing poltergeist activity and think, oh, we've got too embedded in that family, and they kind of, because they want to believe them, and then, you know, people could be tricking them. So it's pretty pretty difficult. It's a hotbed of ethics, really, sometimes, especially with high strangeness cases. So I think we have to have that consideration, and with using hypnotic regression, I think, you know, you should have really qualified people, and you should, you know, have some means of justifying it as well. You know, like with the Betty and Barney Hill case, it was employed for therapeutic reasons because Barney Hill wasn't feeling well and had, you know, different symptoms, and so we went for hypnotic regression to help solve, you know, psychological problems he was experiencing. And it was only the abduction story that came out as he had that carried out. But there again, you could say Betty Hill had a lot of impact on what he remembered, because she wrote down different nightmares she had not long after the encounter. And I think she was the one pushing the idea of abduction and that they'd had missing time. I think Barney Hill wanted to just repress it and say, oh, I don't believe that. But under hypnotic regression, he filled in what the hypnotist was letting him say, filled it in with perhaps what he remembered of what Betty had told him, really. So it wasn't they were kind of, you know, a lot of people said, oh, there were separate stories, but it was such a long period of time from that initial encounter. We had plenty of time to talk about it or see things on TV. You know, there's a lot of science fiction on Twilight Zone and programs like that. And American researcher like Martin Kottmeyer has shown that, you know, a lot of movies of that period have scenes and incidents in them very similar to what they reported. And, you know, I don't think there's a one-to-one correspondence with, you know, that image, you know, that's film or something, and that encounter. But I think there's all these background influences on what people report. And so I think in a way it's good to have some understanding of what media was around and what media, you know, these people might have been exposed to. Some people say they've never been interested in science fiction or anything, but often science fiction is couched in films like the James Bond films. There's a lot of science fiction elements to that.
Yeah.
Or back in the day, there was the Avengers. That was a kind of crime spy drama program, but it had, you know, it had these cybernauts or cyber robotic cybernaut things, and it had quite a lot of science fiction themes in it. So even if somebody didn't see the Twilight Zone, they probably saw a program that had these sort of themes in it. And sometimes TV's in the background, and you might just pick up on what's going on, but not really have your full focus on it. So I think there's that aspect of UFO sightings, that media can perhaps influence what people later report, but I think it's a two-way street as well, because, you know, like with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that use stories from Hynek's files and from UFO real UFO reports, you know, like the disappearance of Flight 19, and you know, mentions Gary being abducted and police cars chasing balls of light, and so in a way, he included sort of fictional, factual things that become fiction, and then the fiction can help generate more so-called factual things. So there is this kind of interface between, you know, media and what people report, and also all these films can help, say, support the idea of alien abduction and spindly grey aliens, whereas, you know, if people hadn't seen those films, they'd just say, oh, you're just making it up, whereas these films support these ideas and kind of also give it a kind of authority, you know, that these greys now have kind of a predominant alien in mainstream media. So if you make a science fiction film, you can easily slip a grey in it because people know a grey is an alien. So
yeah. No, I get that. But just going back, you saying about kids' imagination. I know I'm not saying people don't question it, but adult imagination. So when we have encounters and experiences, no one's turning around going, "Oh, you're just being silly. It's just your imagination." I know you do get it, but it's not as much as they do when it's a child.
Yeah. I think human imagination is quite powerful, and I think it was Alvin Lawson sort of hypnotically regressed people who didn't have an alien encounter, and he found their stories were very similar to people who did claim real alien encounters. And I think there's been experiments where people have been, you know, asked to draw pictures of UFOs, and they've come out very much like the ones other people have, because in a way we've all got a picture of what an alien might look like. And perhaps also over time in the 60s, people might have drawn aliens with antennae and the little green letters, and then nowadays somebody will do a large-headed alien with large almond eyes. So in a way, we've all got this kind of cultural idea of what aliens should look like, and also with the rebranding of UFOs as UAPs, things are being changed again. Or, you know, like in the past, you know, it was flying saucers, when UFOs, UAPs, and then in the Second World War, it was Foo Fighters, then Phantom Rockets. So by having just that kind of label, kind of conditions us to expect to see or imagine the same thing. That's particularly true, say, of Kenneth Arnold and his sighting of flying saucers. At the time, a lot of he was a pilot, and a lot of aviation magazines had pictures of these experimental aircraft that were circular with, so we were experimenting with them. By the time Arnold had his sighting, we weren't flying these prototypes, but he was probably aware that advanced aircraft had a circular design, and I think that had a certain impression on how he interpreted what he saw that day, and how, the term flying saucer came about. And then people reported seeing flying saucers that are classically shown in sort of 1950s films, but he didn't actually see a flying saucer. What he saw was more like a boomerang shaped thing. So really, he didn't even see flying saucers, and yet because of the name, it kind of put a stamp on what people reported seeing. And I kind of like the term flying saucer because so many people have reported that shape, and I think it's a bit more honest than UAP, because UAP can cover anything really. And I suppose it's a little bit better than UFO because we're trying to show that UAPs are more than just something flying in the atmosphere, that they can fly into the ocean, and that they've got fantastic acceleration and high speeds, and perhaps a link to non-human intelligence. So it's interesting that the subject's gone through different fashions and different labels as well, but I think at root we keep dealing with the same thing. So I think we shouldn't be too seduced by these labels.
No, they're going to keep changing. So just as you get used to them, they bring another one out. Right, we've got 9 minutes left, and we've got 4 questions. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Right, so this one is from Darren, Baby with a Laser, and he wants to know, Nigel, what story in particular solidified the subject for you?
That's a good one. I've mentioned the Betty and Barney Hill case, and that I did find very convincing. John Fuller wrote Interrupted Journey, and that's a sort of classic incident of people driving in the night, being followed by a UFO, and then coming home with this and finding out there's like 2 hours of missing time. And that the story they're told under hypnotic regression, they're being analysed and probed by these aliens. And it did seem sort of kind of a bit outrageous, but it seemed like a logical thing that if a spaceship did land and it had aliens on it, this is the sort of things you'd expect a sort of aliens to do to people. So I think sort of solidified my interest in the subject and made me want to know more, even if I thought it's just something that happened in America. It's still worth looking beyond there.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Same person, Darren again. He's on a roll tonight. I think he's had some caffeine. Nigel, as well as researching, do you investigate too?
Well, yeah, I did at that time. I suppose if you call investigating going to see the people and interviewing them, and I did collect a lot of information from the people, but I felt like I was almost like a collector of information, like the people who collected stories about folklore in the past.
Yeah.
I was recording things. And I think as well that to be an investigator, perhaps you need more skills, as a psychologist or, somebody with a bit more authority and expertise, really. So I was trying to just do it to my own abilities, really. And I'd put my 5 pence worth in afterwards, but I never really discussed people's experiences like saying, oh, that compares to Betty and Barney Hill, or this compares to that, or have you seen an Adamski spaceship sort of thing. I just let them tell the stories, which I suppose was a little bit frustrating for them because we didn't get as much feedback as we like. But in a way, I just wanted the information to be collected without too much interference.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Next one is from Bimjin. So he's saying, what about the recent Las Vegas backyard ET stroke aliens? He believes that that was real. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's really strange because I think it was recorded on CCTV, and we're supposed to be these sort of 9-foot tall aliens that went into somebody's back garden, and I kind of it didn't seem that believable, to be honest. But there is a sort of CCTV footage, and for people who witnessed it say it wasn't a hoax, they really believe it themselves. So I think it's one of these things I haven't really looked into that much, but it did seem kind of one of these really weird cases, because there's so much stuff about UFOs, and then suddenly people have started reporting sort of aliens again. So, that would be a good case to watch out for and see what American investigators do with that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Next one, Darren again, right? He's not allowed to ask any questions next week. He's taking them off from everyone else. So, Nigel, was it, I don't know if Emo or Mo people case in Italy, was it ever proven fake? I first saw that on John Craven's news round in the 70s.
Oh, blimey.
Wow, that was a while ago.
Yeah, that was a good one. But I think, it mainly happened in Europe. I think a lot of the documents came from Spain or France. But I think it's sort of well known that it was a hoax, and that I think I don't know if there was one or two actual individuals identified, but it seems largely a hoax. It spoke a lot about these UMO craft and their planet and everything. And in Britain, we had something called the A-Pen, sent fake letters out to people in Britain. I think I got one of their letters, and they said they were a sort of secret organization that knew a lot about where UFOs come from, or they were the organization behind UFOs. I think the UMO thing was quite an elaborate hoax, and they do occur. And I think there are books available that have come out in Europe mainly that have discussed them in more detail. But that's a good one, and I'm surprised John Craven had it on his news round. But all the same, it's a good reference source, isn't it? Have a forage.
That'll be in the archive somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Got one more question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So this is from Sophia, and she's asking, whom are the biggest misinformation / disinformation?
All right. Well, I think it was somebody called Richard Doughty, who was I think he worked for the United States Air Force, and he spread a lot of misinformation, and I think he helped inspire the Majestic 12 papers that suggested that there was no government organization that was put together to retrieve alien wreckage and that sort of thing. I think the Majestic 12 documents were fake, very much like the UMO papers. But I think the kind of motive behind perhaps Majestic 12 and perhaps even Doughty is that if we put enough information out, that it will force the government to release real information. So in a way, it's kind of almost like a double bluff, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I suppose the more a government might protest against it, the more people will start believing in it. So And in a way, ufologists are the worst misinformation agents, really, because we all go around saying that's true, that's false, but don't believe him, believe me. So in a way, the authorities can just chuck in a UFO report and just let us go on with it, a bit like Rendlessham Forest.
Yeah.
There could be something really simple to explain it, but ufologists have kind of up and run with that story, and so I don't think you really need any sort of authorized misinformation agent. I think the subject can run away with a case, and then we have a lot of trouble to define what really did go on, or if actually anything did go on, or very tricky.
But just quickly before we end, just on the back of that question, do you think that if they, I don't know who they are, but I'm just going to use the word they, if they give out enough true information, that we will do ourselves, I suppose, misjustice and get to the point like you've just said, and then we just think it's so far-fetched that it can't possibly be true. So then we stop believing that, and then we just make our own version of that up.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what's going on.
Yeah. And I think this whole thing about disclosure is like some people say, well, disclosure's already happened, but it depends on how you define disclosure. What are we expecting to get disclosed? And then if we don't disclose what we're expecting, is it because they don't want to disclose, or is it just that there's nothing to disclose? So there's that whole thing like governments opening their UFO files. People say, well, we're just going to release the rubbish stories anyway. They're not going to release the really good stuff. So people are never going to be satisfied with anything governments tell us, often with good reason. But
but then, like you said, it's like, even if they did give us like the full information, I don't think many people would believe it was true anyway, because of how much they've lied in the past.
Yeah,
so you're never going to get it.
Even if I said it was aliens, people say, oh, there aren't such things, it must be something else. So
yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you so much for coming on, Nigel. Sorry about it all being glitching at the beginning.
All right, thank you.
But it's been great having you on. Thank you for answering the questions honestly and giving your direct opinion on it. It's been great. Everyone in the chat's loved it. Thank you to the moderators and members. Thank you everyone listening on podcast, Spotify, Apple, the list goes on. So hopefully we'll get you back on, because I'm sure there's going to be 1,000 more questions for you. Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's been great. So just before I go, we're going to be back at 9 o'clock on Friday. Myself and Nicole are going to be talking about Gettysburg and what happened on the flight back. And then we are going to be on Sunday at 8 p.m. UK time, when we're going to be on with Midwest Night Watchers and Chiro Sounds, Gerald and Jane. 2 p.m. CST, 3 p.m. EST. So that is everything. So thank you all so much. I've got some updates about actually going to Rendlessham, not this weekend, the weekend after, but we're going there in the night, 7:30 meetup. So let's see if it's any different in the dark than where it is during the day. It seems fine. Hopefully we won't get arrested. You never know.
Oh, no.
Touch wood. So yeah, but we'll talk about that near in time anyway. So thanks again, Nigel. Thank you everyone in the chat. Thanks for all the questions. So take care, and we'll see you on Friday at 9 p.m. All right. See you later. Cheers.
Goodbye.